Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the absolute oldest, most profound puzzles humanity has ever faced, the whole cycle of life, decay, and this grand concept of resurrection. Now, we're going to break down how classical theological texts actually approach this. And spoiler alert, they don't just ask for your blind belief. They use really structured, undeniable logic. So, settle in, because we have a fascinating journey ahead today, tackling a massive idea with some surprisingly simple reasoning.
All right, let's jump right into part one, the oldest question.
Since literally the dawn of human consciousness, looking at mortality and decay, it sparked this really visceral skepticism in us. It's just human nature to look at something that's completely broken down and wonder how it could ever exist again. We naturally ask, who will resurrect decayed bones? And honestly, this isn't just some modern critique. This is an age-old human objection to the whole concept of an afterlife. Once bones have mixed with the earth, turned to dust, completely decayed, how could they possibly come back? It is a perfectly natural, logical hurdle our minds hit when we start grappling with mortality.
But what our source material reveals here is truly fascinating. Rather than just demanding blind faith or, shutting down the inquiry entirely, these classical texts actually try to provide the simplest, most honest, and logically sound answer to this specific problem. They don't shy away from the doubt. Instead, they meet this human skepticism head-on with reason, which makes for a much more compelling study.
And the response? It's incredibly direct. This foundational counter-argument from the Qur'an answers the question of decayed bones by completely reframing the problem. It shifts the focus away from the decayed self and points directly back to the original origin of those bones, stating, whoever created them the first time will resurrect them. It's a pretty profound pivot in perspective when you think about it. Which brings us to Section 2, Commander and the Army.
To kind of bring this abstract idea down to earth, the Islamic scholar Bediuzzaman uses this absolutely brilliant visual metaphor. Picture this. On one hand, you have the monumental, almost impossible task of creating a brand new army entirely from scratch. You're recruiting, training, and organizing every single soldier out of absolute nowhere. Now compare that to a commander simply blowing a bugle to call an already existing, but temporarily dispersed army back into formation. It would be completely absurd to tell a commander who just built an army from scratch that they can't simply call those same troops back together, right?
So, our source material maps this army metaphor directly onto the natural world. If you acknowledge a power capable of creating all living things from absolute nothingness, well, just look around. The text points out that we literally see a massive cycle of destruction and rebirth every single spring. Hundreds of thousands of species seemingly die off, wither, and decay in the bitter winter, only to be recreated and reassembled in the spring. If that first creation happened from nothing, the subsequent reassembly is happening right in front of our eyes, just echoing through nature's continuous cycles.
Let's shift gears a bit for Section 3, the first-time logic. Now we're looking at a very strict logical progression here, a philosophical method known as a fortiori reasoning. Step 1 is the first creation, right? Bringing something into existence out of absolute nothingness. Inherently, this is the hardest possible task. Then step 2 is the second creation, taking elements that already exist, even if they're scattered or decayed, and just putting them back together. The deduction is clear-cut. If a creator has already accomplished the vastly harder task of step 1, then step 2, logically, it's undeniable.
So the crucial point here is this first-time logic, which basically dictates that doing something for the first time from absolute nothingness is inherently way more difficult than reassembling it a second time. What's amazing here is how the source text neutrally uses basic, undeniable deductive logic to solve what initially feels like an insurmountable problem. It's asking you to rationally compare resurrection to the even greater difficulty of initial creation.
And that leads us to our final piece, Section 4, Recreation. Let's bring this whole analysis full circle back to the original scripture, specifically the Yasin chapter, verses 78 and 79. It reads, "He who created them the first time will give them life. He is the knower of every creation." This perfectly encapsulates the logic we just walked through. Our source notes this entire framework is beautifully detailed in the classical text known as the 10th word. It brings the army metaphor, the spring rebirth, and that first-time deduction all together into one cohesive, undeniable statement. So, I want to leave you all with a highly relatable question to chew on today. Have you ever experienced that doing something for the first time is just way harder than doing it again? We've explored a really grand theological concept today for sure, but it perfectly mirrors a very basic, everyday human experience. The logic of the universe often reflects the logic of our daily lives. Think about that the next time you tackle a difficult task for the second time. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this helped unpack and structure these incredible ideas for you.